2020 virtual session of Lake Forest City Council. Will the Deputy City Clerk please call the roll?
Honorable Mayor Panleon,
Here.
Alderman Morris,
Here.
Alderman Karas,
Here.
Alderman Rummel,
Here.
Alderman Notes,
Here.
Alderman Preschlack,
Here.
Alderman Gashkarian,
Here.
Alderman Bushman, Alderman Weber.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now I have a brief announcement to make. In accordance with state statute, I've made a determination that it was not practical or prudent to schedule an in-person city council meeting because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is why this July 20th, 2020 city council meeting will be held remotely. The first item on the agenda is reports of city officers, comments by the mayor. I have two comments. First, I'd like to read a little message really for our police department. You may or may not have seen this on the news, but in late June, after 25 years of effort by a whole litany of Lake Forest police and police officers and detectives over 2 generations, the police department was able to secure the extradition from Poland of the suspect in a fatal 1995 DUI-related crash that occurred on Route 41. This would not have been possible without the hard work of many people over the years from a wide array of organizations. The subject basically skipped bail and fled to Poland, and had been hiding out in Poland trying to avoid prosecution. The city would like to thank the following organizations for their help in this case: Lake County State's Attorney Mike Nerheim and his staff, the Republic of Poland, the United States Marshals Service, U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, U.S. Department of Justice, U.S. Department of State, the Lake County Sheriff's Office, and our own officer, Mark Sanger, who, along with generations of Lake Forest officers before him, never gave up on this case. This is a major accomplishment for our police force at the international level, and we should all be very proud. Thank you, Chief Carl Waldorf, for leading this. I think this must have been probably 5 or 6 police chiefs, along the way, but Carl's been involved in this from the very beginning, and just very, very proud moment for our police force to bring this person to justice. The victim was left a family behind, and that family really deserves this. So thanks again. My other comment is to announce Lake Forest Day proclamation, or to provide the Lake Forest Day proclamation, and then we'll have a little bit of a presentation from members of the McKinlock American Legion post. Whereas, for the first time since World War II, the McKinlock Post 264 of the American Legion asks all Lake Foresters to take pause on Lake Forest Day, Wednesday, August 5th, 2020. Whereas due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it has not been possible to undertake appropriate exercises and entertainment in celebration of Lake Forest Day, Legion's annual fundraiser, which brings together the people of our city in the furtherance of civic interest and advancement of community fellowship. And whereas the Post has heretofore had to cancel the parade and carnival under the restrictions of the CDC guidelines, and whereas under these highly unusual worldwide circumstances, let us all remember these wonderful celebrations of the past and continue to support McKinlock Post 264, its local scholarships, and various causes. Therefore, be it hereby proclaimed that said Lake Forest Day celebration is declared to be a city fair in our own backyards on Wednesday, August 5th, 2020, shall be observed as a holiday on the city of Lake Forest, and our people are urged to gather with their families in a spirit of comradeship and goodwill in support of the ideals of our city. Thank you. And now we have a brief presentation by Ed Garrity, the Lake Forest Day Chairman, and Dave Lipinski, who will be assisting him with video.
Good afternoon. I'm Ed Garrity. I've been a member of the Lake Forest American Legion Post 264 for the past 15 years. It's our post's great honor that we've been hosting the Lake Forest Day event since 1921. This would have been our 99th year hosting the event. We look forward to having the carnival, the parade. It's just a tremendous event for the city of Lake Forest. We couldn't do it, though, without everybody's help, and especially the help of the city. So we truly appreciate everything you do for us, all the help we get, all the assistance, and everything else that the community does for our post. Unfortunately, this year, because of the pandemic, we had to cancel both the parade and the carnival. However, next year will be our 100th year running the parade, running the carnival, and we plan to make 2021 better than ever. So thank you for the proclamation. Thank you for your help and assistance, and looking forward to seeing everyone in 2021. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ed and Dave, and to all of your fellow Legionnaires. One thing I'm not sure everybody realizes that Lake Forest Day is the only fundraiser that the American Legion has every year. And it's a significant burden on them not to have Lake Forest Day happening this year. I think most people in town received a mailer from the Legion with the raffle tickets inside, and I would encourage everybody to buy lots of raffle tickets. So help the Post continue on as a stellar sort of pillar of our community. Next item on the agenda is a COVID-19 financial impact update from Elizabeth Holub, Finance Director.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I believe of the monthly updates on the impact to the city's finances of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is going to highlight changes from last month to the best interest of time. This was our budget impact assessment. You've seen this, identifying which funds we anticipate being most heavily impacted by COVID-19. Next slide. Next slide, general fund. So these are the significant revenue sources and the risk assessment in the general fund revenue related to the fiscal year 21 budget. Our emphasis is really focused on sales tax and income tax tracking for its impact on the general fund budget. Next slide. Looking first at municipal sales tax, I've changed these graphs a little bit to kind of isolate the changes from last month. So the graph in the middle of this chart, or the chart in the middle of this slide, shows April municipal sales tax. So in gold, you see the actual revenues from April 2019 sales. In gray, this was our original budget for April 2020. The third column is the revised budget. So this was the estimate for April 2020, included in the modified budget and finally approved budget from May 4th. And then in green, the fourth is the actual April 2020 municipal sales tax revenue. So unfortunately or fortunately, which depending on which way you look at it, our forecast of 50% in April was dead on. And so we did see about 125,000 decline in municipal sales tax revenue for April alone compared to the prior year. As noted in red, July receipts. So these receipts are coming in July, but they relate to April 2020 sales. So we have a 3-month lag. This was the final month that we needed to receive information to complete and close out fiscal year 20. So this does in fact impact April 2020 and therefore FY20 actual revenue. And then I just included for you below the year-end numbers for FY20. You can see from the bottom going up, our FY19 actual municipal sales tax revenue was just under 2.1. We budgeted for FY20 2.2 million. We estimated a total of 2.4, and positively we came in for the fiscal year 20 year end at 2.5, a little better than our estimate in April. Just note for your information that it did include in FY20 a one-time receipt of 400,000. We've discussed that in previous finance committee meetings, but just wanted to point that out. So that did, impact the FY20 revenue compared to FY19. Next slide is income tax revenue. Focusing on the box in the chart in red, we've now received 2 months of revenue associated with fiscal year 21. And we have seen for both months, revenues come in significantly higher than what we had posted for our projections for FY21 budget. We did a little digging, and the chart on the right is actually from the Illinois Municipal League, which publishes projections and additional information on state shared revenues routinely throughout the year. But they noted the same that we had, in that both April 20 and May 20 had come in significantly higher. The reason for that is because Illinois fully taxes unemployment benefits. And because of the additional COVID-19 unemployment, some people in Illinois are earning unemployment that actually exceeds their former wages. And so that is part of the result of those revenues exceeding our estimates for April and May. And just note that that supplement expires in July. And so after that impact is passed, we'll begin to start seeing revenues fall short of budget projections. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? It was a bit of an anomaly that took some research, but is an interesting development since last month.
There is a move afoot in Congress to extend those benefits probably at a lower level so that they won't go away entirely, but you'll have less of this impact of people earning more on unemployment than they earned when they were working.
So for now, it's a positive impact to the city's budget from that standpoint. Next slide, please. We'll now move to Parks and Recreation Fund. This slide continues from last month, just focusing our attention on program fees, revenue that accounts for about 28% of the annual budget in the Park and Recreation Fund. And in the slide, you'll see, next slide, please. Here we go. So this shows activity through June 30th, 2020. So has both May and June operations included. We've separated parks and forestry from recreation programs as we did last month. You can see what the prior year-to-date actual was for revenue, expense, and net, what the budget is, and then what the year-to-date actual is as of June 30th. Then on the right side, you can see the fund total combined. I've just highlighted in yellow the current year-to-date as of June 30 to last year's year-to-date as of June 30. Deer Path Golf Course Fund, we noted last month that these results based on the timing of receiving financial information from Kemper will be on a 1-month lag. So what you are seeing here are May 31st financials. But you can see the prior year-to-date actual revenue expense as of May 31 compared to this year, May 31. Revenue, expense, and net operating. And the final fund is capital improvements funds. We're here on revenues, and you can see the chart on the left. The two more heavily impacted by COVID-19 are rural sales tax and the real estate transfer tax. Those two revenues combined for 41% of budgeted revenue in fiscal year 21. And so the chart here shows prior year budget and prior year year-to-date actual, as well as current year budget and current year year-to-date actual. These figures are as of June 30th. So you're seeing 2 months of activity. A couple things to note here on property tax. As you know, Lake County is allowing for homeowners to pay their property taxes with a modified payment. It's not 2 installments. They can actually spread that out over 4 installments. So we recognize that the actual collections by the end of the year should be on target, but we might see some deferral in collections as a result of folks taking advantage of the modified schedule. So I would just note that property tax, while we do have a lower budget this year for property tax than we did last year, you also see a reduction in year-to-date actual compared to prior year. Overall, though, we're not seeing a lot of that deferral in Lake Forest. I think from community to community, they're seeing different results, but we're not significantly off where we would have forecasted to be as of June 30th. You can see home rule sales tax, because that went into effect last year, July 1st. We had no revenues yet last year. And you can see what our revenues are year-to-date actual for this year. And then real estate transfer tax, you saw in the finance committee packet in the flash report, and I think you've also heard communications from the mayor and the city manager on some real positive development in real estate in Lake Forest right now. We do have in this line one-time revenue from the sale of Kelmscott Apartments. That was $215,000. And so even with that pulled out as of June 30th, real estate transfer tax revenue is strong, so that is encouraging. On the next slide, we're just reporting back on the local business grant program, just tracking this. We have now received 16 applications. So still a slower response than I thought there might be from the local business community in seeking grants through the city's program. We have allocated $25,517 in awarded grant amounts. And of that, we paid out $1,969 as of June 30th. And the final section just tracks our different buckets for COVID-19 costs and recovery. Just the 3 items highlighted in red, which are updates from last month. As you know, Lake County received $122 million in CARES funding from the federal government, and they appointed a committee to allocate those dollars out to different purposes. They have now allocated $9 million to local governments within Lake County. These are municipalities. They also allocated $1 million to fire protection districts in Lake County, and we have received guidelines and instructions on how to make our initial submittal to Lake County for reimbursement of COVID-19 expenses. First submittal is due July 31st. On your August 3rd City Council agenda, an intergovernmental agreement relating to this program. for your review and approval. They will take submittals by July 31st without executed IGAs because they realized there was a short turnaround for the initial submittal. And, they simply would not act on the city's submittal until they received an executed IGA. So more to come in early August on that, but that is definitely a positive development since last month. IRMA grant, they were awarding up to $2,500 for PPE for all IRMA members. We did apply for that and received the $2,500 check in July. And then as we noted last month, there was a Rebuild Illinois Fast Track grant program, which was making $25 million statewide eligible for funding. The city did submit an application for Rosemary Ravine, but was not awarded funding. So we did make an effort at that, but did not receive funds through that program. So that is the update for this month. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Elizabeth?
I have one quick question. Thank you, Director Halib, for such a wonderful report, so thorough. Just a quick question regarding the small business grant program that the city's putting out. Can you comment on the size of businesses that have applied for the grant within the city, whether it's restaurant, retail, service? Is there any sort of comment on that?
So it's kind of interesting. We've actually, you may have noted on the slide, awarded grants from $30 to $6,600. So it's been somewhat interesting in who have submitted. I was trying to recall, I don't think we have a single, no, we do have a restaurant that has applied. Mostly it's retail, miscellaneous retail. And I think that we may have seen a slow submittal right now because they don't have a lot of sales. So as you know, we calculate the grant amount based on last year's sales, but we paid the grant amounts out based on sales that they generate from March 2020 through December 2020. So they lose nothing by waiting to apply until they're back in operation and they have some additional sales. I think we may see them kind of aggregate several months of activity and then submit later in the year.
I know the Chamber of Commerce has been communicating about the grant through their email communications regularly. So I was curious to see what has come forth so far. Thank you.
Sure.
This is Judd. I just wanted to compliment he tracks a lot of the stuff in the middle of the pandemic and working from home and then the extra reporting. It's a great achievement that you've been able to consistently pull this together, keep us posted. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, we need a motion to approve the Lake Forest Day proclamation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do that regularly. Okay. Thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the Lake Forest Day proclamation.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Yeah, I think everything's a roll call vote. So
Alderman Morris, Alderman Karas,
Aye.
Alderman Romo,
Aye.
Alderman Notes,
Aye. Aye.
Alderman Preschlack,
Aye.
Alderman Gashgarian,
Aye.
Alderman Bushman,
Aye.
Alderman Weber,
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries.
thank you, Joyce. The next item on the agenda is comments by the city manager. Jason?
Thank you, Mayor, and members of City Council. Before I get to the one item I had on the agenda tonight, I did want to take just a minute to address another agenda item that's contained within the omnibus agenda, and that is approval of a successor collective bargaining agreement between the city and the Lake Forest Employee Association. As noted in the write-up, LFEA represents all of the city's maintenance workers, primarily in public works and in parks and recreation. And I just want to take a quick opportunity to acknowledge all those who are involved and to extend my appreciation for how smoothly the negotiations went. I feel like I've had the good pleasure of becoming a broken record in saying this after all of these successful negotiations occur, but really I think it is a testament to both the reasonable approach from our employee unions and certainly to the job that the city's negotiating team does in approaching and handling these negotiations. So I just want to take a minute to thank from the LFEA negotiating team, Brian DeBates, Mike Gernens, and Anthony Carabello. And from the city's negotiating team, our lead negotiator, Deshay Kalmar, Mike Thomas, Sally Swarthout, Dan Martin, Chuck Myers, and Jim McAfeer. And so really kudos to all of the individuals who were involved. Very pleased with the way the contract and the negotiation turned out. And again, I think it's just a testament to the strong labor management relationship that exists here in the city. And so we just wanted to acknowledge that before it comes up later on the omnibus agenda. Next, I have a brief presentation from our fire chief. As most of you know, last month, the fire department commissioned a new engine into service. And beyond it being an impressive apparatus, it was also the culmination of a 3-year effort to really transform the fire department's fleet. That, as I noted, started back in 2018. It predates a lot of us, quite frankly, who are here tonight, but a lot of credit truly goes to our fire chief, Pete Siebert, to our deputy chief, Kevin Cronin, and the rest of the fire department. And really their efforts have not only positioned the department and its fleet to best serve our community and the residents, but really the overhaul occurred in a manner that was remarkably creative and cost effective in purchasing or acquiring what can otherwise be remarkably expensive equipment. So again, recognizing that there are a lot of aldermen on the council now who may not have been here in 2018, I thought this would be a good opportunity for Chief Siebert to provide a bit of a summary and an update on the overhaul that has occurred over the last few years. So with that, Chief, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jason. Can everybody hear me okay? Hello?
Yes.
You got me. All right, great. Thank you, Mayor Pantaleon, members of council, for letting me come on tonight just to do a brief update. As Jason said, about our fire fleet update. And I basically just kind of want to tell you guys how we got from October 2018 to present day. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth on these. Just to give you a little brief history though, before my time, 1991, the city purchased 4 pieces of fire apparatus. They got this squad truck, this 100-foot aerial tower, and this engine, and there was a twin to this engine that was sold, I believe, in the late 90s. They bought all those pieces of equipment for $1 million. It was a great deal, but the only problem with this plan was all vehicles came to age at the same time. And we also purchased a vehicle in 1994. So I started on the force in 1996, and all 4 of these vehicles were here when I started. And as of just in June, the last one left. But as of October of 2018, all 4 of these vehicles were still here. And our newest vehicle over here is 212, was purchased in 2007. So we were looking at a daunting task to replace this fleet. And in today's dollars, to replace each one of these pieces of equipment would be probably well over $3 million at current market value. So we knew going forward, just trying to get one engine and to try to keep it under $550,000, our task was going to be very hard to try to replace all of our equipment at once with brand new. So we took a different strategy at it, and we basically took these 5 vehicles that total up to 116 years old. which at the time was an average of about 23 years old. And we reduced our fleet down to 4 vehicles that are now 43 years old with an average of just close to 11 years old. So this didn't all happen easily. We went through quite a few hoops here to get this done, but we ended up deciding on we wanted to keep this engine. This is our extrication engine. It has a lot of equipment on it for auto extrication, and it's in relatively good shape. But then came the task of selling off these vehicles. The first one we sold was 251. It's a manpower squad that just really has tools and an oxygen compressor. It did not have hose or any water tank on it, and didn't really, quite frankly, wasn't getting a lot of use. We sold that for $25,000 to a company that drove it all the way up to Canada. And the next one following that was 231, which was our 100-foot aerial tower. And we quickly found out that the resale market on some of these vehicles were not going to be the greatest. But we sold this to Seneca, Illinois, a small volunteer department downstate Illinois, just over $32,000. And then our next vehicle we sold was 216, which probably was our highest mileage vehicle, even though it wasn't the oldest. And that went to Guadalupe, Mexico for the whopping sum of $6,000. And they drove it all the way from Lake Forest to Mexico. 2 weeks later, I'm happy to report that they were on a fire, and they sent us a picture of a big petroleum truck on fire. And this vehicle was working, and it had new stickers on it and was the Guadalupe Fire Department. The last vehicle we got, we tried to sell off was 215, was the last of our 91s. And we had it listed for $5,000 on a government auction and had no takers. So trying to come up with some creative ideas, we reached out to NIPSA, which is the Northeastern Illinois Public Safety Training Academy. We send a lot of our new members there through their basic fire academy, and we donated the vehicle. And in addition to that donation, we've also received promise of an academy tuition in the next 3 years, which will serve us well. And we're glad to see that the vehicle will go to train some of the new firefighters coming up through the area. So after all these vehicles being sold off, we had to come up with replacements for them. As I said, we kept 212, which is our extrication engine, and we are looking right now at some plans from Pierce, the manufacturer, to do some much needed refurbishment that will hopefully make this vehicle last another 15 years if we're lucky. We also got these 2 vehicles when we partnered up with Libertyville to take over fire and EMS services for Knollwood. So this used to be a Knollwood engine, a 2008 engine, and then this 2003 ladder truck was also at Knollwood. So the engine we bought off straight through them for $110,000, and then the truck is an interesting story because it was a grant purchase. We tried everything we could to go through the grant people to adopt the grant and assume it, but that wasn't able to happen. So we worked creatively with the Rockland Fire Protection District, and we were given a 10-year lease for $0. So that's a big key in this plan that really saved us a lot of money. We did put in about $60,000 to $80,000 in paint and lettering and refurbishment of these vehicles, and they're both running frontline today and serving us well. The last one down here in the corner, most of you heard the story of this engine, and we probably should have had it about 3 or 4 months ago while it was being assembled in Marion, Wisconsin. It hit a deer when they were coming back from a engine manufacturer that was doing some fine tuning on it, and so I had to replace the whole front end. So it's definitely been an up and down with that, trying to get it in service with the pandemic going on. But we're at a point now where we've we started this back. Deputy Chief Cronin and I really started hatching this plan maybe back in August of 2018. Presented the plan, and probably we're under 2 years. If we wouldn't have ran into some of these problems with 214, we probably would have been under 1.5 years, but we had made this conversion. It was really a great accomplishment for our department and everybody that helped out on it. For me, the day seeing this last 1991 roll off to the Fire Academy being donated was the culmination of the project, and a very proud day for the Lake Forest Fire Department. So that's my presentation, and happy to answer any questions if anybody has questions.
Well, I don't have a question, but I just want to compliment you on your creativity in getting this accomplished and getting these new vehicles on the road. I came on the council in 2017, and I remember during my orientation having a little tour of some of those vehicles, and to say they didn't appear at that point to be state of the art would be an understatement. So thank you so much for working to improve these vehicles and the creative way you've gone about it. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we definitely, I would always show that when any of our new aldermen would come on board, I wanted to show them the aging vehicles. I will say we have an excellent fleet department, and the reason these vehicles lasted 29 years was because of our fleet department keeping them on the road, and we would be lost without those guys, and we really appreciate everything they do for us on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I think kudos that that vehicle made it to Guadalupe, Mexico. I mean,
Yeah.
that speaks volumes of your maintenance department, right?
Yes.
Other questions or comments?
Great. Well, thank you very much, Chief. And again, congratulations on all of your efforts, and Deputy Chief Cronin and the entire department. I know particularly with the newest apparatus, those are highly customized pieces of equipment, and it's a team effort within the department to get that exactly right. So kudos to everybody involved. And if there are no other questions, Mayor, then that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the opportunity for citizens to address the City Council. Members of the public can call 847-810-3643. We'll pause here for a moment to see if anybody would like to speak to the council. The information about the call-in is shared when the agenda is published and is also posted at City Hall. So we'll wait for a few seconds here for Amber to let us know if there are any callers.
Good evening, everyone. There are no callers.
Thank you, Amber. Next item on the agenda is committee reports. We'll have a brief report from that Alderman Morris is going to make about the GFOA award presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a continuing award that we've benefited from the team we have on the finance department, who are consistently awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. As the write-up notes, this is the 41st consecutive year of this reporting award, but we have probably 7,000 units of local government in Illinois, and only 5.1% of those units are awarded this achievement, coming from the Government Finance Officers Association. So congratulations to the department. I was going to try and figure out how to send this over virtually to hand it to the director, but I don't think that's going to work. But in addition to that, there also is an award for an individual who is instrumental in the financial reporting, and that is Diane Hall. So again, I wish I could pass this over virtually to Diane. She does a tremendous amount of work, and you know, we have a very small department, so it's amazing that they're able to reach level of excellence.
I'd just like to echo those comments. I've been only on the council for a couple of years, but the thoroughness of the budget packet for the fiscal year when you come on for the first time, the tracking to the flash report, the implementation of ERP and kind of redoing chart of accounts flawlessly and under budget. And the list goes on and on. keeping us abreast of the impact of COVID. You know, our job as fiduciaries is made much easier to have a strong, capable, both finance lead and team and infrastructure. And it really can't be said enough, you know, to say thank you, because it helps us make really good decisions. And as volunteers, we're really relying on the staff, and they just do such a great job. So I really just always impressed, and thank you so much.
Any other comments? Thank you, Alderman Morris, for your presentation. Thanks and congratulations to Elizabeth and Diane once again, carrying on the long, successful tradition. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing on the city's annual appropriation ordinance. I need a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
And then do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a roll call vote, please, to open the public hearing. Joyce, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Alderman Morris,
Aye.
Alderman Karas, Alderman Rummel,
Aye.
Alderman Notes, Alderman Preschlack,
Aye.
Alderman Gashgarian,
Aye.
Alderman Bushman, Alderman Weber.
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries.
Thank you very much. I would turn this over to Finance Director Holub for a brief description.
And Leon, the City Council received a presentation on the fiscal year 21 appropriation ordinance and approval of rollovers at the June meeting when you approved first reading. Just as a reminder for those in the public who may be viewing the meeting, the city adopts annually a budget, which is our guideline for revenues and expenditures for the year. However, the legal mechanism for authorizing the expenditure of public funds is via the appropriations ordinance. And we are required by statute to have an appropriations ordinance adopted and filed with the Lake County Clerk by the end of the first quarter. So by July 31st, based on our fiscal year. So the appropriation ordinance before you for final approval this evening includes the approved FY21 budget that you adopted on May 4th. But it also includes rollovers, which are items that were budgeted and appropriated for fiscal year 20. But for differing reasons for individual items, those things were not completed or not initiated in FY20. So the operating department is requesting a rollover of that appropriation from FY20 to FY21. And included in your packet is a detailed itemized list of the rollovers requested as part of the appropriation ordinance before you this evening. In addition, there are some adjustments between the budget and the appropriation ordinance. So we include a worksheet in your packet to kind of cross-reference the formal approved budget from May to the appropriation ordinance before you this evening. One of those adjustments includes a contingency amount that is 10% for each fund. This item is not included as far as the day-to-day administration of the budget, but does give you the authority and latitude to approve expenditures that may not have been anticipated when the fiscal year 21 budget was approved. And so that contingency amount in the appropriation ordinance gives you that legal latitude to approve those. Those do come to you for specific approval throughout the year. And you will typically see in the write-up a note that should it be required, a supplemental appropriation will be provided at the end of the year. We also include School District 67 through the charter. We do incorporate School District 67's appropriations within the city's appropriation ordinance, even though the city really has no control or authority over School District 67 expenditures. And for the library, who is a quasi-external component unit of the city, you do not approve the budget as part of the approved budget in May, but their approved budget is included in the appropriation ordinance and specifically called out in the appropriation ordinance by amount. So at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding the appropriation ordinance or the rollovers, and then we would be seeking City Council approval, granting final approval of the appropriation ordinance.
Any questions on this for Elizabeth? Okay. Any member of the public that would like to comment on this, since this is a public hearing? Wait a minute or two to see if any calls come in.
Joe, maybe you could put the phone number back up on the screen. Thank you.
Good evening again, everyone. There are no calls.
Thank you. In that case, I would entertain a motion to approve the appropriations.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Karas.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Notes. Alderman Notes.
You're muted.
Alderman Preschlack.
Aye.
Alderman Gashgarian.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
Alderman Weber.
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries.
Thank you. Then I need another motion and another roll call vote to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Karas.
Aye.
Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Notes.
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack. Alderman Gashgarian.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman. Alderman Weber.
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is approval of an additional $2 million transfer in fiscal year 2020 from the general fund. Again, presented by Elizabeth Hollow.
Thank you, Mayor Pantaleon. We have a few slides that Amber will bring up by item. So by way of background, the City Council fiscal policy sets forth fund balance targets for all of the operating funds of the city. The fund balance target of the general fund, which is the primary operating fund of the city, is 35% of annual revenues plus the accrued sick and vacation leave liability. So as city employees accumulate balances of sick and vacation based on personnel policies, when they leave employment with the city, they are paid out their balances. So that liability is included in the fund balance target. Traditionally, general fund operating surpluses have been used for different purposes, including transfers to other funds, primarily to the Capital Improvements Fund, to supplement ongoing revenues that support the 5-year capital improvement program. And also, of late, the City Council has allowed general fund balances to accumulate in order to provide insurance against any impacts to the city's budget because of the state's financial crisis. This could be either a reduction in state shared revenue to local municipalities or limitations on the city's property tax generating ability. In addition, general fund operating surpluses and fund balances have been used to address unanticipated expenses. One of the noteworthy items of late was the North Beach Access Road bluff failure and the need for the city to repair that bluff and road. A lot of discussion occurred in 2019 regarding the city's general fund balance and whether it had increased to a level that would support any potential impacts of the state. And so the City Council adopted a fiscal policy on October 21st, 2019 that stated explicitly that the general fund reserves as of April 30th, 2018 were currently sufficient to address those unanticipated needs or potential impacts of the state, and that the city may allocate future general fund operating surpluses to one-time funding needs. So as a result, last year, the entire general fund operating surplus for fiscal year 19 was transferred out of the general fund and transferred to the capital improvement fund to support the 5-year CIP. So as part of the March budget workshop, we bring to the City Council projections on how we think the revenue and expenses of each fund will come in compared to budget. And that gives the City Council an opportunity to make those allocations out of the general fund, and additional transfers were approved as part of the March budget meeting. Amber, you can go to the next slide. What we are doing now, we are in the final stages of audit field work for FY20. They are currently projected to complete field work on Thursday. So we have a few days left to make changes as of April 30th, 2020. And this is why the item is on your agenda this evening for consideration. What I've done on this slide is summarize both the revenue and expenses of the general fund, highlighting budget variances of over or under $50,000 or more based on the budget that was approved for FY20. And so you can see that, for instance, on the revenue side, the single greatest variance to the positive related to building permits, which came in about $600,000 over budget for FY20. And then we also see the second highest variance being $310,000, which was municipal sales and use tax, which, as we noted in the Finance Committee earlier this evening, was related largely to a $400,000 one-time sales tax that was generated in November of 2019. So then you can see both on the revenue side and the expense side, some of the more significant variances, both positive and negative, to the final outcome of the general fund in FY20. On the expense side, I'd also just like to note that as we discuss about budget adoptions each year, we budget for full employment all year. So we budget all positions and all benefits related to those positions as if they're going to be filled for the full 12 months of the year. So we will always have a positive variance in expenses related to any turnover that occurs through the normal course of the year. And so you see several of these positive variances on the expense side being personnel related. That is what that's relating to. So you can see on the expense side, insurance, medical, temporary salaries. A little bit down the list is regular salaries. Further down is IMRF. Those are all personnel related expenses that came in under budget because there was turnover in staffing over the course of the year. So that will generate a net operating surplus at the end of the year. So as you can see at the bottom on the right side, the net operating, the adopted budget for FY20 forecasted a operating surplus of just under $800,000. When we presented year-end estimates at the March budget workshop, we were forecasting a surplus above the 787,000. And at that time, we were given direction from the City Council to increase the last line on that list of expenses, capital improvement, Fund 311. We increased that from 1.5 million to 3 million, and it was made up of a couple things. First, it was a $2 million transfer to capital improvement fund instead of the 1.5 million budgeted, but also $1 million for potential COVID-19 impacts. And so as we discussed in April at the Finance Committee meeting, we allocated $500,000 to potential stimulus programs, part of which is the local business grant program discussed earlier in the evening, and another $500,000 for potential transfer to other operating funds of the city that may be significantly impacted by COVID-19. Primarily, we're looking at the Park and Recreation Fund and the Golf Course Fund. So that $3 million was factored in and has been accounted for. What we're seeing now in the actual column is beyond that a projected surplus of $3.2 million, of which we need to back out the $1 million COVID-19 funding, which brings us to the $2 million recommendation that would be before the council this evening for consideration to transfer out of the general fund to other purposes. Any questions on that slide? Okay, moving to the next slide. This is looking at your 5-year forecast and showing where we were at in both fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 19 and where we now stand in fiscal year 20. With really, while this is noted pre-audit, we are at the latter stages of the audit and do not expect anything more than minor adjustments to these numbers. So in the first number in yellow, that has been increased from 2 million to 4 million, assuming City Council approves the additional transfer this evening. Would bring fund balance of the general fund to $29.4 million at the end of fiscal year 20. The second number in yellow is the $1 million that was set aside for COVID-19 that will not be expended until fiscal year 21. So that $1 million was included on the rollover list that you just approved as part of the appropriation ordinance. We have shown that below as a set aside of ending fund balance. So net of that 1 million, the fund balance at the end of FY20 would be about 28.4 million, up slightly from the 28.3 million in FY19. Also, the last item in yellow just shows the fund balance as a percentage of revenue based on the target. And you see that with the additional 2 million transfer, that would be calculated at 75.4%, slightly higher than last year due only to the fact that the 1 million for COVID-19 has not yet been expended. So it is artificially inflating slightly the fund balance as a percentage of revenue. Any questions on that slide? Okay, moving on to the next slide. As part of the write-up, staff discussed some potential uses for consideration by the City Council of the additional $2 million. As always, we put on this list the Capital Improvements Fund. As you know, capital projects routinely and regularly outpace the needs every year. And so we have a list of priority 1 NF projects that, if any of this transfer was made to the Capital Improvements Fund, could provide funding for some of those priority 1 NF projects. We're not recommending or making any decisions on what those projects would be this evening, simply just approving a transfer of funding that would make it available in the Capital Improvements Fund for expenditure down the road. The other is police and fire pension funds. As the Finance Committee considered this evening, part of the return of fire and police in FY20 and the fact that it underperformed compared to the actuarial assumption of 6.75%. There was a suggestion that the council might want to consider transferring some of that money directly into the police and fire pension funds to offset a portion of that underperformance. As I noted earlier this evening, the pension subcommittee did meet this afternoon. Included in that meeting was Jason Franken, the city's independent actuary from Foster & Foster. And the pension subcommittee considered both the draft actuarial valuation reports as of 4/30/20 and the potential for this transfer of funds and the benefit that it could provide to the financial condition of both public safety pension funds. As a result of the discussion this afternoon, the pension subcommittee meeting made two recommendations. The first being a reduction in the investment return assumption to 6.5% for April 30th, 2020, and that's down from 6.75% at 4/30/19. And also recommending of the $2 million, $1 million to the capital improvements fund and $500,000 each to the fire and police pension funds. With that, I think that's my last slide, Amber. So I'll be happy to answer any questions. Also, anyone from the pension subcommittee might want to add some additional comment on the meeting this afternoon.
Yeah, this is Jed Morris. It was a challenging conversation this afternoon. Former Alderman Newman was part of our subcommittee, and in talking about the actuarial models, it got fairly technical, but the short term is that there's a small impact on our annual funding from this drop in performance. But if we could put in a nominal amount, $500,000 each, it would not typically increase, or help our annual contribution, but over the long term, the interest savings from what's computed in the model would be fairly significant. So it made sense to put something in there to help the current situation. On the other hand, we've got the capital projects, and I think specifically about Burr Oak. And I think given the surprises we had this year in terms of the expected cost of that, it would be prudent to put some money into that capital fund in case we don't get any future assistance from anybody and we still have a large project in front of us. So the thought that we had was to split the monies evenly between the pensions and the capital fund, and then reallocate within the two pension funds this $500,000 each. We also thought that given the projected economic impact of the pandemic on the stock market, well, it could be up, and I think Alderman Romo referenced it could be up in succeeding years. The other North Shore communities, there's quite a few of them that are at 6.5%. And so we're not out of line with what other people are thinking about. So it seemed like it was prudent. Once our investments are moved over to the state, which is going to happen 18 months out from now, and we begin to get some performance metrics from the state, we can reevaluate whether we should adjust that interest rate assumption either up or down. But we thought it was prudent to keep it at what we thought would be 6.5%. So I'll leave it there, and we'll see what questions there may be.
Jed, I guess point of inquiry, that's Alderman Gashgarian. I know we had this discussion last year when we moved our interest rate assumption from 7.0 down to 6.75, and now discussing going down to 6.5. Is there going to be any inherent benefit tweaking it lower down to 6.25, realizing it would kick up our contribution, at least for the next year? Just worrying about falling further behind on that curve. Sort of playing the conservative route on this, not knowing exactly what the returns are going to be once this is turned over to the state of Illinois.
Sure. And Director Howard, maybe you have the number, I don't have it right in front of me, but the nominal increase on the annual contribution, I think we said was about $500,000 a year. Is that, do you have those numbers?
Yeah, I just pulled them up. In police, the change from 6.75 to 6.5 resulted in about $180,000 increase to the funding requirement. And on the fire side, about 170,000. So
Right.
find about 350, 380.
So that's not an insubstantial amount. It just seemed prudent to hold at 6.5. We can obviously go lower if the markets continue to be depressed, as we've heard in the investment reports at the Finance Committee. But it didn't seem prudent to drop down. The actuarial consulting firm that Jason represents, he was saying that he's quite a few clients in this 6.5 range. He did acknowledge that there are larger funds that are higher, 7% and higher, but he thought 6.5, based on his experience in consulting with these municipal funds, that 6.5 was reasonable.
And again, another question related to that. If we saw in the future, say 3 months from now, we could always adjust that down if we chose. Is that correct?
It's a recommendation from the subcommittee to the city council, and we can definitely do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is Jim Preschleck. I mean, I think it's important for all of us just to get on the same page about the trade-offs here and what we're talking about and what the dynamic is. So if the actual return assumptions go down, then our plan contribution is going up, proactive plan contribution. That means that the negative consequences or surprises or like an unfunded issue, the chance of that goes down, right? But by doing that, we're ostensibly crowding out potentially other priorities for capital in our community to the tune of what it sounds like $250,000 or around 10 grand a basis point if you're going from the current rate to 6.5. And so it really becomes like, what's the best use of our capital here? I mean, that's really what we're talking about. So we're not trying to optimize one little thing, we're trying to take a step back and go, we want to get ahead of the curve. We want to kind of maintain the proactive policy to push down the curve and get out in front of it like our state is not doing. But we also want to fund capital projects, and we cannot forecast the future returns, the actual returns. It's not possible. Okay, now, well, you could say, well, interest rates are historical lows, so bond prices won't really go up because there's not much place to go, but they can go negative, but that's not probably likely, right? And that's what all the investment consultants say is, but nobody can forecast equity returns or real estate returns or anything. All we can control is our budgeting parameters to be conservative and good stewards of our community and how we allocate capital. So I'm very supportive of the 6.5 as long as we don't feel like we're stealing capital from a project that won't get funded. That's one NF that is really important to our community. And I think that's how we need to talk about this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, that's a question that I have. Would we be using this money to fund those 1 NF projects specifically, or are we going to, well, I guess that's an issue and it would be a recommendation from Public Works, but there are some projects on that list that I know I personally would like to see funded. I'd like to see them off the NF list. But having said that, I suppose if we don't get outside funding for Baroque, that's going to take up a good portion of this allocation right there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I'll let the director talk to that and the city manager, because we did talk about what would be on the list at the top of the list for future funding. And that's going to be the conversation we'll have this fall as we go into the capital project prioritization that they'll be doing. But city manager Busha, do you want to comment?
Yeah, no, and I think Alderman Morris stated it well, but really, in essence, we're not prepared tonight to discuss specifics as to what projects this would move up. We look to all of you to have that conversation in November during the capital workshop, specific to the additional $1 million allocation as recommended by the pension subcommittee. In many ways, those funds certainly, while they can be of use for the upcoming fiscal year in FY22, and we have discussed, the significant expense of Burr Oak and its likelihood of crowding out other capital projects from other asset categories. One of the reasons I think staff was comfortable making a recommendation on having some of those funds diverted to the capital fund was probably more so for FY23 rather than FY22, in the context of understanding that we've been very fortunate over the last few years to have finished each fiscal year with a robust surplus in the general fund, and we've been able to allocate and transfer those funds into the capital fund. But as we forecast out the current fiscal year due to the pandemic and perhaps some other reasons, at this point, we anticipate a much smaller surplus. I think I'll defer to Finance Director Holla, but I recall our presentations back in the spring forecasted, as conservative as a $300,000 surplus rather than a multi-million-dollar surplus. And so the surplus that we'll finish with at the end of this fiscal year really is what carries over to the FY23 capital improvement program. And so it's really about not necessarily picking a specific project today or even in a couple months, but also just, maintaining the long-term health and viability of the capital fund. But with that, I don't know if Elizabeth, if there's anything you want to add, but I would just echo Jed's comments that discussion about specific projects on the 1NF list, that's, a conversation we'll have with all of you as we head into the fall.
I don't know if Director Holla wants to jump in.
Nope, I would just note that City Manager Wisha was absolutely correct. Currently for the general fund in FY21, we're forecasting a surplus of $356,000 with $300,000 transferred over to Capital Improvements Fund, significantly less than the $2 million that was transferred for FY20. And yes, that is primarily related to the conservative assumptions related to COVID-19.
And I may just quickly note, I think I had saw Alderman Bushman trying to comment. That may be the case. I thought I saw your mouth moving there, Ray, but we can't hear you, so.
Ray, you don't show as being muted, but we can't hear you.
I checked it, that's why I went back and I have my speakers on, the speakers work, I checked the speakers.
Okay, now we can hear you faintly.
Maybe I have to speak louder? That's still not good?
That's a little better.
I tell you, go continue, I'll try and get a better speaker system here.
That actually sounds pretty good now, if you want to go ahead.
Oh, okay. The comment I was maybe seconding somewhat of Alderman Prushlack and the needs that we have from a capital standpoint, and the litany of things we have under the 1NF list of things, and looking at the other side, whether you want to take the 1 million and put it towards the pensions. I do recognize that the investment return is shown through April 30th, showed a negative to what was in terms of investments. But I go back to the comment from earlier that was made. If you look at the next 2 months, May and June, there was a 5% positive to the investment return. All of which says, as was said earlier, it's hard to predict what the stock market's going to do going forward. Certainly the last 4 months, we saw significant gyrations. And I think if you're looking at just trying to capture it as of April 30th,
that may be not the most representative way of looking at investment returns. I guess I'm thinking that our needs better served by taking the full 2 million and putting it towards capital at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would second what Ray is saying, and I like the recommendation that came out of the pension subcommittee today. It's just, I think there are a lot of unknowns here. I think we've been very conservative in some of our assumptions that are built in here. We may not need some of the money we've put aside for COVID. We may see greater real estate transfer tax revenues coming in. There could be some real positives that we see coming down the road as much as we plan for some of the negatives. So I think we can have a robust discussion of some of these assumptions maybe when we have our workshops. So thanks.
I think the sense of the committee, the subcommittee, was we want to continue, and this is something Jim mentioned a little while ago, we wanted to continue trying to get ahead of this pension problem in spite of what are expected to be lower investment returns, simply because we're not going to invest the pension plan in all equities. There's going to be some component of fixed income, and that would be expected with zero or low interest rates to be a drag on portfolio performance for some time. It kind of helped us shore up that plan. At the same time, we didn't want to go there because there are other needs here. And so actually we formed a pretty rapid consensus around the idea of sort of spreading it around like this, bolstering the capital program with an additional $1 million. Remember, this is money we didn't think we had a week ago. This is a bit of a bluebird. And so the thinking was, let's not put it all in one place. Let's use it to solve several different issues we're confronting. And also with some view, what Melanie was saying, that it appears now, at least so far, that some of the revenue streams that we were afraid were going to be really badly impacted have been less impacted than we thought. And we've got a couple of pleasant surprises here in terms of real estate transfer taxes. We didn't mention before, but the golf course is trending toward more of a best case scenario than a worst case scenario. And the non-resident beach fees have been much more significant than we were anticipating. So we do have some good news so far, but this year is not over. We've got to get all the way till next April, and there could be a lot more that happens here, as we get into the fall and winter. So that was just the sense of the committee, that it would be that sprinkling it around a bit would be a good idea, but definitely with the bulk of it going to capital.
I just want to add to that the comment from Alderman Rummel earlier about the post-consolidation returns. I think there was also a sense in the committee that it's reasonable to expect higher returns down the road from this consolidation and the improved performance metrics that they would be following. So 2 years from now, we may see this uptick in performance, in which case we can revert back to some different assumptions, I think.
But that all depends on what happens in the general marketplace. Those kinds of numbers are things that are generational. It'll take a generation for those higher returns to really start to appear in a consistent way. We might have a couple of good years, but then we could be followed with a couple of bad years, even with the broader investment mandate. So,
well, I think, Mr. Mayor, you I think categorized the subcommittee's work pretty well, and I think there's probably no more important subcommittee in our governance structure than the pension subcommittee, because it is fairly technical and there's lots of different moving variables and to see clearly through it. But the key word to me is compromise, right? And putting different pieces of surplus capital that we just found into mouths or buckets that need it. And so I'm comfortable with the subcommittee's recommendation. And there's going to be capital available for capital projects. I mean, this is just incremental here. And so it's not like we're going to shut down any one NFs, especially if it's you know, if it's really, really important, we're going to make it happen. We have cash reserves for that. So, you know, I'm not concerned, and I think it is very important, I think, to stay ahead of the pension curve, because the pension curve, if you underfund it and there's bad performance and there's historical, you know, underperformance based on historically low interest rates, we could kind of be right back where we started if we don't keep our eye on the ball on the pensions. So I think it's proactive. I think it's smart. I don't think it's going to shortchange any high priority capital projects. You know, if this was between Burr Oak and incremental money to the pension funds, then I'd say, well, let's talk about it. But that's a false choice. So let's not let's frame this for what it is. I mean, it's on the margins, and I don't think we're having to say no to anything. But it seems like a compromise to me that makes sense and was well thought out by a subcommittee that you know, is very astute on these issues and how we should best manage them.
Other comments? So I guess I would entertain a motion to approve the recommendation of the pension subcommittee.
I'd make that motion,
Second.
or second, or whatever.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Morris,
Aye.
Alderman Karas,
Aye.
Alderman Rummel,
Aye.
Alderman Notes,
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack,
Aye.
Alderman Gashgarian,
Aye.
Alderman Bushman, Alderman Weber.
Aye.
8 yeas, no nays, motion carries.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Nice to see that we have you back, Jennifer. I think we may have to have a conversation with Comcast at the city level if we're going to continue on these kinds of meetings, because several of us have had difficulty. I'm now operating on these meetings on a hotspot because I don't trust Comcast. I'm getting pretty much every conference call I'm on, I get clipped out at some point or another.
I'll be moving to the same.
Yeah.
It's hard to trust it.
I would just note that if any of you are experiencing routine issues with connectivity at your house, feel free to reach out to our IT department, and there may be devices we can provide to ensure quality streaming for these meetings.
Well, I think the problem is Comcast, and I've talked to them a couple of times. I've spent several hours on the phone with them in the last 2 weeks. They assure me that no, they can't come out to the house because of COVID, but they can fix it remotely somehow, and it never gets fixed. And it's anyway.
Well, Jim Shaw believes the solution's the Verizon hotspot, so we'll move to that.
Yeah,
It's not just a residential issue either. At my business, we've been dealing with a lot of phone issues as well as internet.
Interesting.
So it's all over.
You know, we used to do that every once in a while. We'd bring Commonwealth Edison in for a little discussion. Maybe it's time to do that with the Comcast representative. Anyway, next item on the agenda is items for omnibus vote consideration. First, there are 8 of them tonight. First is approval of the extension of the mayor's declaration of a local state of emergency until the next city council meeting. Second is approval of the June 15th, 2020 city council meeting minutes. Third is approval of the check register for the period of May 23 to June 26, 2020. Fourth is approval of collective bargaining agreement between the city and the Lake Forest Employees Association, as noted before by Jason. Number 5 is authorization for the city manager and the city clerk to execute a First Amendment to the fiber optic facilities license agreement between the city of Lake Forest and Abbott Laboratories. 6th is approval of a revised employment agreement for city manager Wisha. Number 7 is award of the thermoplastic lane marking contract to Superior Road Striping, Inc. in the amount of $94,000. Eighth is consideration of a recommendation from the Public Works Committee in support of amendments to section 150.391 of the City of Lake Forest Code relating to storm sewers and surface drainage. Waive first reading and grant final approval of an ordinance. Are there any items here that would any member of the council would like to have removed or taken separately?
You know, I have been looking at item 8, and here's where I don't have a problem with what's proposed. And I raised this with Jason earlier, and I just think that when we're sort of as a policy, when we're changing an ordinance, or which in this case really is a kind of a significant change to this ordinance, and it's an ordinance that will have impact directly on some residents, I just think we should put that under the part of our agenda that is dedicated to ordinances and sort of call it out and get at least a review and explanation of it, especially since we're asking to grant final approval on this. So I don't know if Kathy or Mike Thomas or anyone would want to talk about just what we're doing here. So just in the interest of transparency, so that, you know, residents can understand what we're doing here. It's just, I kind of feel there's no higher calling for the city council than when they are dealing with creating laws and changing laws. And I just am not, I'd rather not see it on an omnibus agenda.
Kathy, I know, would be happy to speak to it, and your comments earlier are certainly noted. Are happy to accommodate that on future. As noted in the write-up, this had gone before the Public Works Committee, but for recommendation to the council. But I'll turn it over to Community Development Director Zerniak.
Well, on that point, Jason, aren't most of these things first approved by one committee or other, even when it's an ordinance? So
generally, when you see these types of items included on the omnibus, in many instances, it has first gone before a prior committee and has received at least approval for recommendation to the full council. So that was sort of the process behind it. But again, your comments are well noted, and so we can address that a little differently moving forward. And then specific to this issue, again, Kathy's more than qualified to speak to it.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking my comments into consideration.
Thank you. A head nod or a thumbs up if you can hear me. Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As many of you know, on a regular basis, staff reviews various sections of the code. We review them to update them in the event that there's new trends or if issues have arisen, or simply if we become aware of some provisions in the code that are not clear. The staff has been talking about this particular section, section 150.391, which is titled Storm Sewers and Surface Drainage. Although it is a short section, we've talked about it for a fair amount of time. We did bring this to the Public Works Committee, I believe at the end of last year or beginning of this year, thinking we would move it forward before everything changed. And then we brought it forward to the Public Works Committee again in July because we knew we had some new members. So this has been reviewed and recommended by the Public Works Committee on 2 occasions. In summary, the driving issue for the changes proposed was to document in the code that stormwater discharge pipes needed to be a minimum distance of 10 feet from a property line. The issue that we have seen on a continuing basis is that storm sewer pipes are put in, they perhaps discharge over the public sidewalk, over a public street. In the wintertime, they can create hazardous conditions, icy conditions, or lines discharge at or very close to a property line. So the water's discharged onto neighbors' properties. For many, many years, we have, our kind of unspoken policy has been that we have told people that those discharges needed to be 10 feet back from the property line. Given the increased concern about storm water, certainly the council's hearing more about stormwater with our heavy storms, it seemed to be appropriate to come in and actually document in the code that minimum setback distance of 10 feet. At the same time, we looked at other language in this section and clarified some language really to acknowledge that the best solution for dealing with stormwater on a private property is not always to connect to a public storm sewer. And is rarely is the solution to connect to a road drain. Road drains were simply not designed to handle storm sewer. So although the changes are fairly minor, they are really intended to set clear expectations for residents, for neighbors, and frankly, to simplify the job of city staff, to give us that clear code language as we go out and work with property owners. So again, not a significant change, but we feel that it's important. We have played with the language a bit in response to some concerns we've heard from the members of the Public Works Committee. But if you choose to do so tonight, it would be appropriate based on the recommendation of the Public Works Committee to waive first reading and grant final approval. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Kathy? Okay, there being none, I would entertain a motion to approve the omnibus agenda.
I so move.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Alderman Morris,
Aye.
Alderman Karas,
Aye.
Alderman Rummel,
Aye.
Alderman,
Was that me? Notes. Yeah. Aye.
Alderman Preschlack,
Aye.
Alderman Gashgarian,
Aye.
Alderman Bushman, Alderman Weber.
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries.
Thank you. The next three items are there is nothing on the agenda for ordinances, old business, or new business. So the next item on our agenda is additional items for discussion, comments by council members. Is there anything that any council member would like to speak about right now? Non-agenda item?
You know, I would just say on the omnibus issue that that Alderman Rummel raised, I mean, I think it's a good point. I'm very comfortable, and I always feel like I can say I would like to talk to this, and I think the mayor's done a great job, and the prior mayor's done a great job. So we have so much business, and I think the omnibus serves a very good tool because we can all read it, we can all ask questions ahead of time, and then if we think it's important to Alderman Rummel's point on this particular one, to call it up for discussion, then great. And I think that's really good. I think it's full disclosure. I think it's very transparent. I have really no issues with the current process. And I think I would just like to encourage all of us, if we feel the same way on a particular omnibus issue, to do that. Because I think the staff is always happy to have conversations. They're always well versed on it if we give them a heads up. And I think it's a really works very, very well. I think the alternative of draining every single ordinance, and I pick on lawyers sometimes because I'm not a lawyer, but you know, it can be a lot, right? And there's a lot of business that we have to do this. So I'm very comfortable with the format, and I'm very glad that Alderman Rummel raised this issue because if she feels strongly about this, it should be discussed, and everybody else should also, you know, feel very comfortable saying, I want to talk about this omnibus if it's important to you or you think it's important to your constituents or community. So I think it's working really well, and I'm glad she raised the issue, and I just encourage everybody, you know, to continue to operate in that way.
I agree with you, Alderman Preschlack, and I'm not opposed to having items on that omnibus agenda. I don't think we actually consider ordinances that frequently that it, you know, that having a general rule that we put it under ordinances and just have a quick explanation for it. It's not so much for our benefit, I don't think, as much as I see it educating the public and letting the public know that we are now changing a law. And it's a law that could impact them directly. And so that's just my personal feeling about it. You certainly may agree or disagree, but it's not, as I say, I certainly can review these things in advance and look at them in advance. I was on the Public Works Committee when this came up originally, fully supported. So it's not for the benefit of me or for other people on the council, I don't think, as much as just calling it out for the benefit of the public who may be listening in. That's my point. But thank you. I appreciate your comments too.
I would encourage all of you, if you see something like that in the omnibus that you feel should be addressed separately, and it needs more than the kind of discussion we had tonight, which can always happen, by the way, to just let me know, let Jason know. We can always move it off of the omnibus and into ordinances. Remember, though, that everything that comes through the Zoning Board of Appeals, everything that comes through the Plan Commission, all of those routine approvals are ordinances. And so it would, if we just made a blanket policy, it would tend to plug up the agenda quite a bit. So, and there's plenty of precedent for what happened tonight. There's plenty of precedent for significant ordinance items, maybe that did come through the Plan Commission, like the Swift subdivision, for instance, you know, that they do get pulled off. So I think it's just all about open communication, you know, identifying an issue like that and you know, getting it in the place where it belongs. And I'm completely open. I think we're all completely open to that. But I kind of agree with Jim. Let's try to take it on a case-by-case basis and not have a blanket pronouncement about anything that involves an ordinance has to go, you know, under ordinances, because it would certainly plug up our agenda quite a bit. So, other comments? In that case, if there's no further business, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Morris.
Aye.
Alderman Karas.
Aye.
Alderman Rommel.
Aye.
Alderman Notes.
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack.
Aye.
Alderman Gashgarian.
Aye.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
Alderman Weber.
Aye.
8 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks very much, everybody.